This has been a very generative panel for me on many levels. I particularly like how all the papers speak to one another. The common theme, obviously, is the platformization of female religious discourses and epistemologies, and how that serves possibly liberatory possibilities, possibly algorithmic purposes. And I think by platformization, I'm not just thinking in terms of algorithmic and social media platforms, although that seems to be the central feature of all of the papers, but also in terms of radio, especially from Dr. Mudashiro's presentation, also in terms of the microphone from the presentation of the last speaker. But I do want us to take questions if there are questions in the room, and if people have questions online, you could use a chat feature or just turn on your mic, your video, and let's engage with the papers. If the panelists have questions for one another, that would be great too. And as people begin to think about their questions, I'll just ask each of the speakers some very quick questions also, especially as we invite questions from the room. For Dr. Ibrahim, I like your talk a lot, and I'm just thinking about what you kept referring to as gender spatial like ideology. And I wanted you to talk a little more about what that means, in particular, gender spatial like ideology. The algorithmic side of your paper, the affectivity of algorithms, there's a lot to respond to, but in particular, I observe you didn't really probably have time to unpack what you meant by gender spatial ideology. What exactly is a configuration of space in this gendered framework? Are you referring to space in terms of the the political valences of it, or are you thinking about space in terms of the algorithmic mainly, or perhaps in terms of the religious? For Dr. Mudashira, I wanted you to talk about the affordances of radio versus social media, especially at the level of audiences. At the audiences of course, these different platforms have different audiences, and I wonder how that that distinction affects your case studies. What are the audiences of the Elijah on radio versus the audiences of the social media example you had? Especially also just thinking that it's possible for me to listen to Fresh FM right here from the diaspora, and what that does to collapse the kind of distinction you make in relation to your case studies. For Ahmad, I like your talk a lot. I like the distinction you make between reach and recognition. Although I do wonder if this binary separation is helpful. I'm also thinking about the fact that people can buy views online, whether on YouTube or Facebook. If I can buy views, how does that reconfigure the notion of reach for you, right? Perhaps something to think about. And you talk about, you draw a lot from Bourdieu, thinking about the idea of field. And I'm wondering if the field of the Egyptian public sphere is different from the field of social media itself, because each of these fields, has different rules, like you said. So I'm wondering how these fields interact and what is possibly generated by such interactions. And finally, as an excellent paper, when you talk about how female-dominated Islamic institutions generate creativity, you also mentioned the possibility of the generation of order, and you said disorder. So I wonder how, and this probably goes back to the other speakers also, is the female preacher a subject of ambivalence? Is are we to understand the female preacher as somebody who is not just negotiating a patriarchal space, but is also articulating some kind of agency, and yet has to, negotiate all of these different possibilities that can be true at the same time? So those are my questions. If you want to take any, whatever is of interest to you, that'll be fine. But I don't know if people have questions in the room, whether online or right there, right on campus. Yes, I see somebody's hand up in the room. If you want to ask a question, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Glenn Adams. I'm the director of the Kansas African Studies Center. I'm also a professor in the Department of Psychology, which informs my question. These are very fascinating presentations, and the question is maybe for anybody who wants to answer it. But I'm wondering about a couple of things regarding the reception and the audience. And I imagine that there's a notion for some preachers and teachers that you're trying to present the truth, and it doesn't matter what the audience thinks about it. Like, you're going to present the truth. But then there's also supply and demand components. And I think when you move to the online space, the demand component, the supply and demand element becomes maybe a little bit more evident, or maybe this is just my misconception. And in that case, if it is true, I'm wondering what kind of demands the religious authorities are trying to satisfy. What are they? What are the motivations that people have for liking or not liking? Is it you might imagine some people are interested in very strict interpretation, and people are kind of outdoing themselves to make a stricter interpretation. But there may be other listeners who are looking for they have other kind of motivations. And so I'm interested in that question. Related to that, I'm interested in the question of whether you see in the comment sections or other spaces for audience engagement a policing or of the speakers, a kind of disciplining by pushback, and whether the very few male, I don't know if there are very few or not, but I think there were some references across the presentations to the proportion of male viewers. When they do intervene, to what extent is it a kind of disciplining, even in this online space, to trying to keep people within certain limits? I think that's sufficient for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there other questions in the room before we probably maybe just take about a couple of rounds before we go to the speakers?
Are you sure? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Yerko. So I have a question that I think can go to all the presenters, and one of the things I'm so much interested in knowing more about is the themes that the preachers cover, during their sermons. So I think, it can go to any of them. Dr. Murtala Ibrahim mentioned the statistics of the sermons, like the I can say the themes covered by Malama Juwairiya. I haven't taken the statistics myself because I'm also working on the same preacher. But my guess was that, it's very similar to what he has provided. So about, I would say 70% or more of the themes she talks about is on, marriage related. So addressing women not as individuals usually, but as wives and mothers. So I would love to hear, especially from Dr. Mudassiru, because he hasn't, talk about the themes of the Muslim preachers in southern part of Nigeria. And I'm so much interested in what our Sheikh Ahmed mentioned. I mean, I like the classification you gave in terms of, the difference between fatwa and da'wah. And I think we can tie that to yesterday's presentation by Mariam on Sheikha Mariama. And I was wondering if there is, in terms of the public response to the female preachers, if there's a difference between whether the preacher is preaching, so she's giving dawah, and Dr. Reham can add to that, or is ta'lim, or she's teaching, like Sheikha Mariama in Senegal, or she's issuing fatwas. So I think, one of the themes we discussed yesterday was the issue of agency. And I would like to bring that back again in terms of whether, I mentioned yesterday, I believe these women have agency. I believe Muslim women have agency. But, what my paper was exploring was, going deeper to see what kind of agency that was. So again, tying back to the papers today, do we still, I would like to hear from the presenters, what they think, if they think the women they are studying are constrained. So Mariam yesterday said, she doesn't think Sheikha Mariama, was constrained in any way. But this morning I'm thinking, after Ahmed's classification, it might be because, what Sheikha Mariama was doing was mostly ta'lim, teaching. I don't think, as much as I know about, the activities of the Sufi women in Senegal, I don't think they do fatwas. I don't, yeah. So is it because of, what she was doing was ta'lim? And again, back to the theme. So I'm so much, interested in hearing briefly about the themes they cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moazu. Do the speakers want to respond to those two questions, and then we can take a couple of questions from our online audience? Dr. Ibrahim,
Okay.
anyone? Yeah.
Okay, so let me start with your question. What I meant by Islamic gender speciality, I'm referring to Islamic gender norms. That is, there are some spaces that are expected, that are, let's say, strictly male dominated, and there are some spaces that are, that women are somehow kind of frowned upon to be visible in such spaces. Like, for instance, a woman to appear in public preaching like men do. So there's a kind of problem about that. So that's what I'm referring to. What kind of spaces are expected women to be visible in, and which kind of spaces are not. Women are somehow out of Islamic norms to see women in such spaces. So it varies from one Muslim community to another. Like in northern Nigeria, for instance, if you see a woman in cinema, people might expect that she's a prostitute. So women are not expected to go to cinema or go to stadium. And so on. There are a variety of such public spaces that women are frowned upon to be visible in such spaces. So this is what I'm referring to. So like, okay, connecting these Islamic gender norms to online spaces completely change the terrain completely, because virtual spaces kind of problematize the concept of public and private space. So you can be in your private room, in kind of visiting, scrolling through your Facebook platform, and physically you are in a private space, but at the same time you are also in a public space, because many people can see you from all over the world. So there's this kind of problematic disjuncture between what is private and what is public in virtual. So it has completely turned it upside down. So so by gender space, this is what I mean. So I don't know whether the other speakers can.
Do you want to connect that to the question of audience policing female preachers?
Okay. So, like the audience, most of the audience of these female preachers are women, because if you look at the nature of the topic related to kind of child rearing, the issues of in-laws, treating husband, there are topics that are strictly addressing women. So that's why most of them are women. But there are also some few men who are also enjoying this kind of topic and also discuss and exchange ideas about it. But the vast majority are female. And also the issue of agency and constraint. You see, if you can look at constraint through two different lens. Okay, there's a kind of legal constraint And there are also kind of normative constraint imposed by variety, whether religious laws, cultural laws, and so on. So these women operate within a kind of space where there is expectation, social expectation. The expectation of their audience somehow constrain their agency. So it's very hard to see this woman engage in kind of deep theological argumentation or kind of political rhetoric. So they somehow restrict themselves to female specific topics that really concern the problems of women. So it's kind of safe constraint because so that not to kind of offend male audience and so or to attract serious criticism from established male theologians by engaging in certain topics.
Thanks, Murtala. Ahmad, do you want to speak to this? I wonder if it's the same in the Egyptian contest or any other question that is of interest to you, really.
Thank you. So the demand and the theme, I think these are very connected to each other, because if the demand, as you mentioned, Professor Adams, is something and the themes that you are using is way different, your visibility and reach, even if you have authority or recognition from your institution, it wouldn't happen for many reasons. And this means we need a very focused research about the themes and more about how many, like for example, Hala Samir, she has millions of views in some videos, and some videos got 6,000. So I need to go more, and to be honest with you, it will be shocking. Like I had the first glance to analyze when this happens and why. Usually, like I see one video with 1 hour for Hala Samir gets 3 million views. So the whole point is, what's the catching point? Sometimes she talks about polygamy, which something that no preacher, males or females in Egypt, talks about. So that's something that refers me or remind me of what you said about the demand. Maybe the demand, like for example, maybe men that they have more wives, they share this with their wives to listen to her because she is telling them, you have to accept that, this is okay. So maybe that's part of it. I need more actually focused research about the themes and about the demand, which one, especially with those people have million views, like Abdullah Rushdi, for example, and Hala Samir. Both of them are, I consider them independent, but Abdullah Rushdi, he is from Al-Azhar and now independent. Hala Samir is not from Al-Azhar and she is independent, male and female, million views. And we can see when they get lower reach and what's the themes that they are talking about and what makes them. Like, for example, Hala Samir, one of the millions views that she got for a video about her conversion in our way. Like, she's a Muslim, she was born Muslim, she was not practicing Islam at all until she was in the last years or senior in college. And she's giving her testimony how she became like that, how she started wearing hijab and wearing modest, and a million of views in this like 1 hour and a half video for this reason. Because a lot, I think Dr. Jackie as well has a lot to do with that, because your research about Yusuf Estes and some of the preachers, their themes and how they are, the preaching style sometimes gets the more views. But when it comes to the differentiation between da'wah and education and preaching and fatwa, I will leave that for Sheikh Fahmy. Sheikh Fahmy's paper is actually very, very good. Like I actually took some of his views, I added it to myself. So I will leave that for him, because his paper is very like organized in that way to show us there are differences. And the Muftiya actually, because I will borrow one of the words that we always talk with Dr. Jackie and me about, prescriptive and descriptive methodology. So fatwas and teaching, as you mentioned, more about prescriptive. and I'm giving you what you need to do. So what you need to do, it can be males and females. So I get more views, I get more recognition because I'm telling you this is Islam, especially if the themes is matching the demand and I am giving you prescriptive. Like I'm giving you the prescription that you need to be a Muslim, how to be a good Muslim. But in preaching, sometimes we talk about tolerance, about some themes that it's like you can get from anybody. But the themes that's focused on the problems or issues in the family or things about education or ruling in Islam, I think these something like we need to focus how we can analyze them in a systematic way. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. Dr. Mudashiru in Ibadan.
Yes, thanks so much. Yes, I hope I will be able to answer one or two questions. Yes, constraint. In recent times, there's no much constraint such that the different Islamic movements and organizations have challenged the authority and their involvement in a lot of events. Of course, the authority in Ibadan is the chief imam who gave Alhaja Kaola a chieftaincy title of Muminat. I mean, the head of the female women. So by implication, because it means they accept what they are doing. It means, of course, notwithstanding they are being challenged by the Salafi and other younger groups because they felt their voice ought to be within the female circle, not in the public space. But because they have freedom, they have authority from the chief imam, they were able to expand their tentacle on the audience. Yes, like I said, and more so, there are also challenges. Like in the larger paper, I also discussed how Alhaja Kaola had issue with some clerics. In recent time, he had issue with some clerics on certain ideology, because at a particular lecture, she gave a virtual on particular issues, and she was challenged by certain groups that she gave a wrong interpretation. But later, she also agreed that the context that she was picked out of context, not that the virtual was not correct, but she was picked out of context, and that was resolved. So that was the audience of the two case studies, the Arabian Ramat and the Alhaja Kaola. Of course, I said in the paper that they have the Arabian Ramat have a younger generations who follow her, and Alhaja Kaola, on the other hand, have adults, married women in particular, who follow her, who listen to her. In fact, she has also engaged in premarital counseling. People consult her on marital before they got married for counseling and some other issues on marital affairs before they get married for marriage. And she also emphasized that in her lectures that she's also a polygamist, and she accepts that people should accept polygamy in good way. And as a particular event recently, she told women that they don't have reason to be checking their husband's phone. Because it's checking your husband's phones brings a lot of suspicions and can cause crisis for the family. So, but in all, both of them engage, have a larger audience of elites, of the enjoy elites, the contemporary Muslims, brothers and sisters who admire what they are doing and enjoy them. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mudashiru. Dr. Nzovo, would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you. And I think I will begin by saying something about the themes of the female preachers. So within the Kenyan context, the female preacher that I studied, when it comes to the themes of their sermons, what I observed is that not necessarily that they would be addressing specifically on women issue, even though there have been effort to, like what I would say as to feminize their program, whereby they will be given like topics on to talk about being a good wife, being a mother, how to raise children. They have those programs, but also I noticed that most of their preaching, I would say most, they are not specifically tied to issue of women, and this is why. Even though the idea of this program is intended for female listener, I noticed that even male listen to their sermon, and this has not been received very well by the conservative ulama, who feel this is not supposed to be space for men, but some men feel that these women are knowledgeable, and whatever they're articulating is something they would want to listen and learn from them. Then on the issue as to whether the women are constrained, for how I could respond to this, I would say yes, but this is in my understanding, in the sense of that one, there seems to be this deliberate to restrict them. These are women, they are knowledgeable than even some of the men, but you restrict them and insist that their sermon should only be targeted and listened by a certain segment of society, especially the women, and not the other segment. I find this to be constraining in the sense that if these women are knowledgeable and they have acquired advanced religious knowledge, why shouldn't they be allowed to share it with the Muslim society or community in general? The other constraint also found was the demanding for those women who are engaging in preaching in the radio station. There's a conservative ulama coming and now to demand then their voices should be in a certain way, where they emphasize the masculine kind of voice and they discourage the feminine and saying this will create fitna. And this is also supported by the female preacher themselves. Some of them told me that, oh, my voice is not so much feminine, and for that matter, it doesn't generate fitna in the community. So this is how, for me, I would look at some of the constraints I feel which are being imposed on these female scholars. Then on the question as where I talked about if the phenomena of this Islamic women-only led Islamic institution and the radio sermon of the female preachers, to whether they create order or disorder. What I can say about this, on order, my understanding is that they create some kind of order in the sense that they are preaching is intended, and this is how it is in the field, that they just supplement the work of the other male scholar. And interesting for me also was that even on issues of women, where you define women, male scholar taking certain position, which you would find not certain position which could be interpreted as discriminating women, you find these female scholars, they don't critique such kind of position that had been taken by male scholars. So this would be interesting to understand. Why is it? Because of the way they've been trained, and that's how they've been convinced and understand this is how it is the truth. And the disorder for me here, I looked it in terms of their presumed gender, in the sense that there is concern that this phenomenon of female preachers should be discouraged by some scholars who feel that the voice of a woman is aura, and if it is allowed to go to spaces where it is not supposed to, then this might create some kind of disorder. And this is how I tend to look at these two concept of order and disorder. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Prof, we'll take a question now and then return to the room in case there are follow-up questions. We have just about 10 minutes to wrap all of this up, but we have a question from Professor Jai Shankar. Prof, you have to unmute, please.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate this conference. It's a very important conference. It opened quite a wide vista of, like many people say, of women, Muslim women who are really professing in the religion. And yes, they have agency, but as many have pointed out, there are limitations. And that's where whether comments or question, and I'm trying to open this up into the larger society beyond just what the women preachers do. Yes, they preach, they have agency, but the agency seems to be reinforcing the established tradition, the established religion, code of conduct. Now, but when we talk of agency and we really look at agency, what is the purpose of agency? I believe that agency, when we have agency, also reach out beyond what can be changed, what can be improved, do we use that agency for? And I want to focus, especially in Nigeria, which has dominated the presentations, but which others have also touched on. In Nigeria, we have the Almanjiris, I think we call them Almanjiris, excuse my pronunciation, young kids who, are said to be in Quranic school, but they go out, they said, people say from what I've gathered, that this is part of the religious training discipline, but it also impedes their education. Now, if Muslim women have the agency within the house, how the children are raised, shouldn't they be talking about this? Do they or do they talk about this at all? Because we are not seeing the effect in Nigeria. And this has larger ramifications because it is said that it's young people like this who are deprived of education, even if Muslim education, that are easily recruited into terrorism and so on, and which is causing instability in Nigeria. And two, and this, I'm not limiting this to the Muslim religion, I'm opening it out to either traditional religion, Isheshe, or Christian religion. If women, because the same thing happens in Christianity that I know, if women can only talk to women, and men are expected to produce financial comforts and other things, but they don't listen to women. And I think this is how they extend it to the political arena, where the masses are not listened to, and the men just do what they want to do. Again, I asked, put it differently yesterday, but the question remains, what can we do about this? If we have agency, what do we use our agency for?
Thank you so much, Prof. And in case the speakers would like to speak to that, just frame it very frontally. Does female agency in online religious spaces reinforce patriarchal domination in offline contexts? But let's go back to the room. About 10 more minutes to wrap up. If anybody has a question, I think I see Professor Braytons and yeah, go for it, please.
I have a question. Thanks to everybody for the presentations. Ahmed, you and I will talk later. I have a lot of questions for you. This is something I think about a lot. And we've been talking a lot over the last 2 days. This is going to be kind of more of a broader methodological question. So we've been talking a lot over the past few days about opportunities and constraints, and the ways in which media maybe offer, or preaching today maybe offers women opportunities, but also has constraints. So those of us who read a lot about media and religion and the way in which the two interact, and are they, how they come together, and this is a very interesting question for me. I'm not of the mind that media transforms religion. So I'm wondering if what you all think about this idea, this proposition. Instead of thinking about constraints and opportunities, we think about continuity and maybe media affordances, although people are probably using other language now. So continuity and media. So there's been a lot of talk about a lot of continuity, I feel like, right? Women preaching to women on women's subjects, the importance for women of having scholarly fathers or husbands in order to gain education, right? I feel that there's so much continuity in what we're talking about, and I also feel like if we reframe it in terms of, okay, what is the continuity and what's happening differently? I mean, we just heard, like in Kenya, men are listening to women. Is that something that media is allowing, right? Instead of thinking in terms of like opportunities. And I think it has a lot of repercussions for agency as well if we shift our way of thinking. So just curious what people think of that.
Yeah, I have a question.
I think because of the spaces as well, like how spaces allow females to preach to males and females is very limited in many places. So I like this, like how we can understand it from different angles. How many times we see a sheikha or a scholar or a preacher in a mosque teaching for both is very limited spaces. Usually media allow them to do that because a lot of conservative, they don't allow the mixing of genders in spaces, even here in America, as you know. Yes.
We're allowed.
Yes, sure.
Many times we're allowing sisters to deliver a speech or to give a lecture, but it depends on her qualifications. If she is qualified enough, if she has the ability, if she is knowledgeable, so she has a space.
Authority.
Yeah.
Again, who speaks for Islam?
No, she has the authority already, but it depends on the qualifications.
That's what I said in my paper: recognition, institutional recognition, and the public recognition. But there is another like theme that I think the demand, because the state has a demand, and the public conservative has their demand, and the liberal has their demand. I figure out now that we always focus on these first two and ignore the third. How many times we analyze and follow a female preacher doesn't have a veil and their views and how they are preaching, for example. So like the states has their demand because they have institutions and they want everybody to follow the way of this institution. But in the other side, we have the public demand, which is sometimes conservative. And by the way, there are some very far conservative and very like moderate conservative. So you're talking about some people, as one of our colleagues says, that they says that the voice of a woman is awra, means like she even cannot speak up. And there are some of people say that, yes, and they are very, very far conservative. And some, no, they are conservative, so they demand the hijab for anybody who speaks publicly from a women's side, but they allow them for the spaces, they give them the chances. And as we see, the conservative part, it can be like very fluid, from very far to very moderate. I'm not going to say left, because the left is going to be, that's what I never seen any research about that.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. We have about 5 minutes to wrap things up, and I want to give an opportunity to Dr. Ibrahim, Dr. Nzovu, and Dr. Mudashiru to offer some final closing thoughts, also in response to.
We have another question here in the room, if you don't mind. Two
Yeah,
questions, I'm sorry.
2 questions. Well, I know you guys in the room want to go have your lunch. We are offline. We'll probably have our lunch here privately. We don't mind. So maybe we'll take the 2 questions, but Murtala, Azan, if you want to respond, let's just make our responses brief also. And if you could formulate your questions very briefly in the room, that would be great. Thank you. Could you use the mic?
Okay.
Just put it closer. Yeah, press it again to be green.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Ibrahima. So regarding Amina's display of authority over knowledge in social media, so is this authority, is it a form of agency by navigating social norms in a Mahmoud Saba sense, or is it a form of diagnosis of power in Abu Ward explanation? So is Amina active in interpreting the traditional texts, as Wadud and Marnisi claim that women in Islam have equal rights in Islam, but the problem is in interpretation?
Thank you so much.
you.
Could we
One
take the
more
second
question,
one?
please.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so thank you all for presenting examples of how media platforms challenge patriarchal norms. So my question is, are there any further barriers to digital platforms that needs to be addressed to create a less seclusion and create more opportunities? So have the researchers encountered any of the debates that leads to pluralistic viewpoints, or since you all talked about the transformative nature of the platforms? Also, this question is for the first 2 presenters, and I will add another question if you can elaborate the first presenter about surveillance as a space. How did you analyze it using which underpinnings? And for Ahmed, so towards the end of your presentation, you talks about why the question that comes to the fore is why men receive dual recognition. Have you thought about measuring the perceptions of the audience, like qualitatively? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Panelists, do you want to speak to these questions as we wrap up? Dr. Ibrahim, you can. Dr. Ibrahim?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so there are so many questions and there is no time really to go through them all, but maybe just a few highlights about maybe the question of what does the new media does to Muslim female preachers? Does it completely change Islam or not? So I think really the person that asked the question has already raised the issue of affordances and opportunity. So I think really the new media, what is create is affordances. So now previously when, for instance, Muslim women preachers have really very limited audience. So what the new media does is they kind of provide or afford them opportunity to reach wide audience. So the issue is now about more circulation, intensification, more distribution, and so on. And so it does not completely change Islam, but it creates new opportunities and new affordances. So I think this is what I will say about this. Okay. Yeah, really the issue of, if you come back to the issue of agency again, I really find this problem very ambiguous because even male preachers also have constraint. So as I said earlier, there are multiple constraints from normative, from legal in some other places, and to culturally, to variety of ways, to social expectation and so on. So this kind of creates or limits a female or even male preacher to really talk within this space that is provided by or that is allowed by religion, by culture, by social expectation, and so on. Okay, let me just take too much time and allow people, other people to say.
Thank you so much for being
Yeah.
generous. Azan, do you want to go next, or probably Maruf?
Okay, I can go. Thank you. Just briefly on the once again on the question of agency as to whether it reinforces established traditions and norms. From my study, what I can say about that, yes, I think the female preacher whom I studied, it was very clear from me that they seem to reinforce the patriarchal view about women. And I find that very interesting in the sense that none was critical about a certain position that had been taken about women. Then on the to barrier on digital platform, since my focus was not on social media, just on radio, then what I can say is that briefly is that radio station, they are gatekeepers. For these women to be able to preach in this radio station, they need to be invited by the directors, whoever who are running this radio station. And for them to be invited, then they need to conform to the religious idea of that particular radio station. If somebody is seen to be, a preacher is seen to be critical on certain position, I don't think they will be invited to this radio station. So they have also to present themselves as people who they are not controversial in their preaching. Thank you.